What up, dude bros? I'm Frank. This is a video review of two new blasters by X-Shot. Zuru X-Shot is now entering the arena with Nerf and Dart Zone. This is the Chaos series, which are rival blasters essentially. Reviewing the Meteor and the Orbit, the first two blasters in this series. So let's get into it. So before I jump into the details on each blaster, I'll generally cover what X-Shot is bringing to the table. Now, both of these blasters are very similar to Nerf rival blasters. They actually shoot balls, and the balls that are included with the X-Shot blasters work in Nerf rival blasters. However, in my testing, Nerf rival rounds do not work in these blasters very well at all. They would shoot maybe 1 out of 10 times. Usually they just fart out of the barrel. I believe the diameter is slightly different. So it's one-way compatible, but you can't use your Nerf rival rounds in these blasters. I'm not sure why. And focusing in on the balls, now they're okay quality, but they're definitely third-party quality. If you've purchased rival rounds on Amazon and you didn't want to spend the money on Nerf and you bought some other brand's ammo, you might have noticed a decrease in quality, especially in the quality control. These are no exception. These are pretty much third-party balls. So if you're thinking, oh, I can save some money by buying the X-Shot rounds, I wouldn't recommend it. These are a little inconsistent. Nerf rival rounds, legitimate Nerf brand rounds, are still the best on the market in my testing. And both blasters came with sticker packs, which I haven't seen in Nerf very often, for a very good reason. It's kind of fun to be able to customize your blaster, but after I installed about 3 of these, I just got annoyed with it. And without the sticker decals, the blasters look pretty boring in my opinion. So it's kind of a bummer. It seems like a cheap move. It's cheaper to manufacture a blaster without putting on those very small white details. So if you're really into customization, that could be a pro, but in my case, it just seems kind of like laziness out of X-Shot, and these aren't at a much, much lower price than Nerf, so I'm not really sure what they're pulling here. But I thought I'd point it out to you because my blaster might not look like yours because I put my stickers on and I'm not perfect by any means, so some of them are a little crooked, but I'm not gonna fix them. Yeah, I don't care about stickers. Sticker review, done. Let's get back to the blasters. So I'm reviewing the Meteor, the pistol that is very similar to the Kronos, and the Orbit, which is this blaster here that holds 14 rounds. They're both spring-powered though. I will start out with the Meteor. The Meteor is a spring-powered internal magazine-fed blaster, very similar to the Kronos. External overview is pretty dull, but I want to point out this is not a real Picatinny rail. It's not a real rail at all. You can't put anything onto this. It's just for the looks. Up here we have the priming handle to prime the Meteor. You do that. Below the priming handle is a trigger safety. When it's out like this, it's safe. You can't pull the trigger. Then you deactivate, and you can pull the trigger, like every other safety ever. And right behind the safety on the right-hand side is the unjamming button. So you're not able to prime it again, but if you hold that down, you can to clear out a jam or malfunction. I did not have any jams with the Meteor, but I did have a number of feeding issues, which I'll go over after the firing demo. The trigger pull is pretty smooth. This blaster does not have slam fire. And down to the grip, it's very comfortable. It reminds me actually quite a lot of the Kronos. If you cut off the magazine in your brain, this whole thing is almost a replica of the Kronos. But the grip is pretty comfortable, very soft, and it's pretty oversized for a larger hand. Those are the boring bits of the blaster. Now to the magazine. This is what makes it totally different than the Kronos, how it loads and how it fires. This magazine is a little strange. So to prep the magazine for loading, you pull down on this little tab and then it locks in the downward position. And when you look down through the magazine tube, you can see this one-way little tab that you push balls through, and after the ball goes through the little hatch, it then locks in. So you reload by just pushing them in like that. And that little flapping tab there prevents the balls from tipping out. Magazine capacity of the Meteor is advertised as 6, but I found some feeding issues when you do load in 6 because this little tab doesn't really close properly, so then my magazine kept emptying itself. But when I loaded in 5 and just didn't load it more than 5, it fed okay. As you'll see in the firing demo, the feeding is inconsistent. But after you load in your ammo, you can press this tab on the side of the magazine, which deactivates that catch. So then the magazine spring is activated and now you're ready to fire. So I fired a few rounds, and if at any point you want to load in more ammo, you just pull down on this magazine tab until it locks, and then you get more balls and you just shove them on in. And I checked, after you chamber a round, you can deactivate the magazine spring because that round is chambered, so you can be loading and then pop off a round like that. You actually cannot do that with the Kronos. With the Kronos, you have to pull back on the slide and load while it's deactivated. So that's one of the few pros that this blaster has over the Kronos. Spoiler, I don't like this blaster. And there's an access door over on the left-hand side that is pretty difficult to get to. If you don't have nails, you might actually have to get a flathead screwdriver to pry it open. So that is the external overview of the Meteor. It's very similar to the Kronos with a much different magazine. Now to the external overview of the Orbit, which operates in a very similar way, but with a much different form factor, but the mag design is similar. Up front, we have an out of proportion Picatinny rail that's sort of close, but not really, but it looks the part and it looks like a real rail. Then we have this cool looking little fake sight up here. This doesn't have batteries, it doesn't have illumination, but it does have a little sticker that you can look through to pretend like you're aiming. Down below is the priming handle. This has a shotgun style priming grip. So you prime like that. The prime action is very smooth and reasonably weighted. On the left-hand side, we have an access door, which is much easier to get to than the Meteor, but I also did not experience any jams or malfunctions with the Orbit that required me to use that. Now to the magazine of the Orbit, which runs up on the top of the blaster here. So it's similar to the Meteor with a slightly different form factor. There's this orange tab on both sides, which you pull back, then it locks to the rear, and it has a similar check valve system as the Meteor, so you can push in balls like this. And once you load up, you can press the little orange tab here that unlocks that catch. And what this orange sliding system actually is the magazine follower. That's pushing the balls towards the chamber. So you have to unlock that in order to get spring tension to load consistently. But this little one-way valve is very similar to the Meteor, but this blaster holds 14 rounds, not the 6 from the Meteor. And down below we have a trigger safety, so it's safe right now. Then you push it to the other side and it's hot, but it operates like most trigger safeties. The trigger pull is pretty smooth, but this blaster does not have slam fire, which is sort of a disappointment given its form factor. I thought you were going to be able to shoot from the hip and spray foam like the Artemis or the Hades, but you can't because there's no slam fire. To the grip, it's pretty comfortable, it's oversized, it's more similar to a rival blaster than an elite blaster, which are generally designed for older people, so pretty comfortable, and you have a sling or a lanyard mount at the bottom. There's also an unjamming button right here, so you're not able to prime twice in a row, but you're able to unlock that just like any other unjamming button. I did not experience any jams or malfunctions that forced me to use that button, but it does work as intended. So that is the external overview of the Orbit and the Meteor. Let's see them both fire. Shooting the included X-Shot rounds. Now I'm gonna try some yellow Nerf rival rounds. Now shooting the Orbit with the included X-Shot rounds. And now the Orbit with Nerf rival rounds. Oh, it's not interesting. Okay. So operating these blasters was an experience. Both of them operate very smoothly mechanically, priming and pulling the trigger. They're very smooth operators. However, their feeding systems are not smooth at all. They're extremely inconsistent. I had the least amount of issues when I was using the included X-Shot rival rounds, or the red balls, but even with the included ammo, maybe 1 out of 10, sometimes more, the ammo would just shoot out and kind of fart out. It would just roll out. It didn't feel like the blasters were chambering the balls correctly. I fired the included rounds through Nerf rival rounds and they fed just fine, so it's not the ball's fault, it's the blasters for sure. And when I fired Nerf rival rounds, the yellow ones, through these blasters, it fed almost none of them. It very rarely worked. It just kept spewing out. I think these might be a little thinner in diameter, I'm not sure, but they just weren't chambering, so both of them have serious chambering issues and very inconsistent firing. I did not have any actual jams or malfunctions with either of the blasters, they just weren't feeding well at all. And to compare these blasters to other Nerf rival rounds, I put both of them up on my chrono. First, the Meteor, or the pistol. With the included X-Shot rounds, I achieved an average velocity of 97 feet per second. With Nerf rival rounds, I achieved an average velocity of 93 feet per second, but the consistency was terrible. I think I had to fire around 40 rounds just to get a 10-shot average. So it's not a true average. With the feeding inconsistencies, the velocity would be like 17 FPS, because most of them didn't even register on my chrono. Then I tested tested the Orbit blaster on my chrono. With the included ammo, I achieved an average velocity of 90 feet per second, but the minimum was 70 and the maximum was 101 FPS, so the range was gigantic, very inconsistent even with the included ammo. And with Nerf rival rounds, which took forever to get a velocity average, was 79 FPS. That was a 46 to 98 FPS range, which is dramatic, very, very inconsistent. And this compares to the Nerf rival par of about 90 to 100 FPS, so it's relatively normal when they shoot how they're supposed to shoot, but they're both terribly inconsistent and don't shoot how they're supposed to shoot all that often. So that is the objective information I can provide on the Chaos Meteor and the Chaos Orbit. Now to my personal opinion on these blasters, starting out with the Meteor. When it operated as it's supposed to operate, it fired fairly well. The trigger pull is nice, the priming handle does have a nice action, but the firing inconsistency would always make me choose the Chronos because I demand consistency. I just want to know what the blaster's going to do so I know how to aim and I know how to shoot what I'm shooting at. This blaster sometimes just farts out rounds. But honestly, I can only recommend the Meteor if for some reason you hate Nerf and you hate the Chronos and you just don't want a mainstream blaster. Then it kinda works. The magazine system is kind of cool. I prefer the Chronos system, and it's a sleeker system that this would not fit in a holster comfortably. So I personally would always choose the Chronos if I had to compare, and they're so similarly priced, it doesn't make any sense to me to purchase the Meteor when you could just buy a Chronos. It seems better. But out of the two, I think the Meteor performs better, but it doesn't perform well, especially when you compare to a Chronos, which is very consistent. It's just a solid Nerf blaster. This one really isn't. And now to my opinion on the Orbit. Now this blaster did not perform well at all. With the included ammo, there is very inconsistent feeding. With rival rounds, it didn't work like at all. The loading system is pretty cool, but it doesn't offer a big enough advantage to cover the terrible inconsistency. Honestly, in my opinion, I would not recommend anybody under any circumstance purchase the Orbit. It just doesn't work well. If you're looking for a spring-powered pump-action ball launcher, check out the rival Artemis. It has a capacity of 30 rounds instead of 14. It works really well all the time, and it even has slam fire. They sent me 2 samples of the same Orbit blaster, and both of them have the exact same feeding inconsistency and just iffy performance. So I know this isn't a lemon, it's just a poorly designed blaster. So definitely low marks for the Orbit. Check out the Artemis if you want a similar platform. So overall, not really impressed with either of these blasters. If you're looking for something similar to this, I would check out the Chronos instead of the Meteor, and the Artemis instead of the Orbit, or just anything but these blasters. I am glad another brand is trying to create ball launching blasters to compete with rival by Nerf and Dart Zone. But both of these fall dramatically short, and I don't think they're really high value options. They're not much cheaper than Nerf blasters, so I don't really see what role they fill in today's market. But to say it again, the included X-Shot rounds, these red ones, will work in your Nerf blasters. However, the consistency in the manufacturing is not to the Nerf standard, so I'd still recommend purchasing legitimate Nerf brand rival rounds. I've tested all sorts of third-party options, and nobody's come close to the consistency of Nerf. Some of them are really squishy, where some of them are more firm. The Nerf rival rounds are very consistent in your manufacturing. And that's important because it affects your firing velocity and the firing trajectory. So if you want to play performance Nerf and that's why you play Nerf rival at all, I would still buy the Nerf rival rounds. And that note's for anybody thinking, oh, these are going to be cheaper, I might as well buy these and use them in your Nerf blasters. I wouldn't really recommend that. So it's pretty cool that another brand is trying to enter the arena, but I wouldn't recommend either of these blasters. That's kind of a bummer. But that is my review and opinion on the new X-Shot Chaos blasters, the Meteor and the Orbit. If you're interested in purchasing either of these, I'll put buy links in the description box below. That's it for this video review. Thanks so much for watching, bros, and as always, stay tactical.